Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now to speak on the state of the nation is former presidential candidate Tope Fasua. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mr. Fasua.
Great to be here.
Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, it looks like we have to start on the one topic that continues to be trending, not only locally, but globally. I was watching and you could see clips of the Shoare rearrest on even local news across the world. These are local news stations, and this is how much the story is trending. I want to start with that. Number one, there are a couple of things. There's been outcry globally on the rearrest. There's been outcry globally on how it was carried out, and just the sheer disregard for rule of law. I want you to talk about this issue. I want you to talk about what it means for Nigeria today and what it means for us globally when it comes to who we are and how the world sees us in regards to rule of law.
Right, okay, thank you very much. We know where we are already as a people, as a nation, as a society. We aren't much respected out there already. You know, if it's about financial transaction or Yahoo and all of this stuff, there's if you got a job in many of these banks abroad like HSBC, Barclays and Co. Or even Bank of America and Co. They'd run you through a training on the Nigerian fraud. So we know we have that problem. But as regards rule of law, we actually are confirming that you know, democracy is not really you know, developed roots in Nigeria as it is, and rule of law has been you know, pushed to the backyard as well. So that's it. Yeah, but however, I believe that it's majorly a liability of the present government. You know, and the world is just kind of seeing that the average Nigerian may just be repressed. And that's the kind of statement I've heard about from some of them, like the senators from the United States who have spoken on this, you know. And of course, the optics are really very bad when you see someone who's a journalist, a former presidential candidate, and of course, an activist of several decades being held down and roughed up in a courtroom the way we've seen, in spite of the denials and so on. It's just not good enough. And of course, we knew what led to that. Court 7, where Justice Ojukwu sits in Federal High Court, I think is on the 2nd floor, if I remember. Mark's on the 3rd floor. And of course, in that building, there are several courtrooms, perhaps 10, 20 courtrooms where judges sit. And therefore, if the DSS stays outside a court room, but within the court premises, within the court building, to rearrest someone who had just pleaded or who had just complained to a judge that this was going to go on through his lawyers. I don't believe that anyone should expect that person who had been traumatized for weeks, who had been held as against and in spite of court order for several weeks, you know, and of course been detained for 125 days before being released. You can't expect such a person to simply just submit himself, having seen the barricade by the DSS. And so there was a DSS guy that was holding him down in black suit, you know, so DSS cannot say none of their people were there. And of course, you saw the guy being pushed and all of that, tall guy in black suit. And of course, the boys that were supporting Shoare had to fence him off. And you could see Femi Falana saying much later on downstairs that, look, he will have to be the one to drive him back to your station, but you're not going to take him from there. And of course, you can't arrest someone within the courtroom, within the court premises. It's just a recipe for confusion. And of course, the court premises is supposed to be a hallowed premises, a hallowed institution. That's why when you get into a courtroom, you have to bow for the judge. It's like getting into a Catholic church or something like that. And so you don't want confusion. I mean, there are all sorts of people being brought into the court building on a given day. You don't want that panic and confusion. So this isn't good. I believe that, of course, if even in spite of the denial, right now, I think Shura is still with the DSS. So that means that they were right, that there were plans hatched to pick him up again, a sort of catch and release and so on. However, I believe that the liability is for the Buhari government and, of course, the DSS and other people working for them.
You touched on this a little bit, but one of the things that DSS has come back to say is that they were not in the courtroom. How do you respond to that when you hear DSS saying that they actually were not in the room and they did not rearrest him inside the court? Because that is what they're claiming.
Now, they're trying to be a bit clever by, with words. So what they're saying is they were not in the courtroom trying to arrest him. Of course, they were not in the courtroom, we know, but they were outside that courtroom. And like I said, there are several courtrooms in that building. That they should be inside that building trying to arrest someone itself is wrong, and it's a recipe for anarchy, and it's a disrespect to the judiciary, to the court, to every court that was there that day, every judge that was sitting that day. The entire institution was disrespected by that act of theirs. And and of course they still picked him up. It wasn't just something that was some charade that was acted. We saw what went on. We saw the guy that was holding this guy, because the guy was the one trying to make sure that Shiwere did not get back in the I mean, you don't just play people's intelligence anyway. So it's highly unfortunate what has gone on. Because again, I think the issue was they were desperate to ensure the guy was rearrested, and so they couldn't take a chance to go and wait for him outside the building. They couldn't take a chance to trail him to wherever he was going after the court session. They had to do it right there and then, and that was what they achieved at the end of the day. And of course, you could see the number of them that were out, with all those arms and all those kids, eventually when we saw the videos of the gates of that court, you could see that they came with several battalions.
Which is what we're showing now.
I think it's an overkill.
We have images from the courtroom.
Yes,
yeah.
And right now
exactly.
we can see
I
them
think it's an overkill. I think it's a waste.
We can see them entering the courtroom right now. We're showing that. And you can see this gentleman with his baseball cap with the camouflage. That is a DSS operative. Anybody who wants to know what a DSS operative looks like can Google it. Google is free. You will recall when the DSS stormed National Assembly, we had mass DSS operatives in their balaclavas with the DSS slogan emblazoned on their uniforms. We had those, and then we had other people with this exact same baseball cap, this camouflage gray-looking baseball cap. So this is one of the uniforms that they wear. So that denial holds very little water when you look at this video that we're showing right now, that they did not enter the court. They actually did. So I wanted to ask you now, Mr. Fasua, since we're referring to the statement given by the DSS, by their spokesman, Mr. Afunanya, who for me is a master of nuance. He picks his words very carefully, so you have to give him full credit for that. He's very careful in his choice of words. I also want to refer your mind to the statement given by the NBA, which was very strongly worded, and calling on the National Assembly to review the DSS and review their functions and what have you. The DSS themselves are aware of a sort of unpalatable perception in relation to them, which is why they have styled themselves as the DSS in the first case. The law that creates them actually names them as the SSS, but they don't want to be linked to that military past and that whole Nazi connotation of the Schuldstaffen. So they're calling themselves the DSS. But we need to go further than a name change, because right now the general public there's a lack of trust in the minds of the general public. The DSS serves such a crucial function. What do you think? The statement that's been released that is unsatisfactory, because we can in fact see DSS operatives in the courtroom. He has been rearrested. There's no mention of why he was rearrested. You will also recall November 12th when protesters went to the area of the DSS office. They didn't even get to the front of the office, and there were attacks. Live ammunition was used against them, or so they claim. The DSS carefully nuanced statement said that no live ammunition was used, they were not shot at. However, it did not go as far as to deny other claims, which we saw that journalists were beaten bloody. We saw that tires were slashed. There were shouts of kill them, by DSS operatives at protesters carrying placards. So what does the DSS need to do now? Or what does the National Assembly need to do, if at all the National Assembly will heed that call of the NBA to review the functions of the DSS?
Well, in my view, I'd say fair is fair. I don't think there's much that's wrong with the functions of the DSS on paper, according to the laws that set them up. You know, I mean, every country has their own secret service that does that kind of work. I read something someone wrote that the DSS should remember that there is supposed to be a secret service. They seem to be so much more in the open these days and struggling, you know, fighting all these wars. I think a lot has to do with leadership in terms of people trying to, you know, impress the leader and therefore doing stuff that is ultra vires the laws setting them up or not knowing their boundaries. I think that's what we're dealing with here. And also, I think, again, overall, I mean, the supporters of government on social media will say, Shore is nobody. He doesn't have an army apart from those boys who go to the court to shout. And then I say, okay, fine. That tells you that this is an overkill. So the whole idea is to say, look, we're going to mess this guy up. You know, we're going to mess him up so that no Nigerian youth will ever think of doing anything or saying anything like that. And as all of this is going on, you have the social media bill coming, and then they say they want to hang people until they die because of whatever they say on social media. And again, the one-sidedness of it all, that it's about it's about what the government perceives to be a sin. You don't even have a word to chip in that regards. And so it's this kind of lockdown. I think it's not going to pan out very well. I think President Buhari should know his liability, and of course, he also should try as much as possible to push back on some of this, because it's just not worth it. I also will say, from my perspective as an economist, that it's a gross abuse and waste of national resources, of taxpayers' money, to have that number of cars on the road, to have that number of guys
Mr.
deployed.
Fasua, we're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back to talk about this some more. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Tope Fasua, former presidential candidate, talking about news that's made headlines. And obviously, we started on the latest chapter of the continued detention of Omoyele Sowore and the fact that the DSS has denied entering the courtroom, which we have seen has huge holes in it, that denial, but they also describe themselves as a lawful organization. This is another theory with holes in it, because flouting of court orders does not make one a lawful organization. You raised the point earlier, Mr. Fasua, before we went on the break, that it's not really a function of legislation, that it's a function of leadership to sort of redirect the DSS. But what happens going forward? Now we have Omoyele Sowore rearrested. We do not know what the charges are, the fresh charges are, if any exist. What are his chances of having a free trial at this point? And how should the judiciary react to this? What is the point of proceeding with a trial when it's been treated in this fashion, rubbished in this fashion?
Beyond the pale, actually, it's beyond comprehension, beyond egregious, if you ask me. That already this is there's no regard at all for the rule of law. The judiciary is going to be treated like a rubber stamp to what it is they want to achieve. Remember that Justice Ojukwu had to come out with a very strong statement before it was even released for less than a day. A very strong statement that made it clear that the DSS was already in breach totally of the law, as it were, before it was released for one day. Again, you know, you don't expect such a person to just generally come out of a courtroom and subject himself to the same kind of treatment. So, if this is it, it has made law to become like a joke. The entire case has become a joke. I was in court twice. for this case. You know, the first day that Justice Taiwo actually ordered his release, I was in court that day, and it was obvious that this was a case of bullying, if you ask me. It was a case of bullying. The case of the prosecution could not stand. Femi Falana actually destroyed that case more than I'd ever seen done anywhere before. You know, there were charges and allegations that were made that could not be supported by evidence. You know, all that stuff about money laundering, and they said that it was moving $9,500 from his account into Sahara Reporters or vice versa. He called that money laundering. You know, all that talk about his been to Dubai for some meeting, and this was someone who has never been to Dubai ever. You know, and so on. So when you begin to concoct such, it's like an overkill. And there's also this very curious allegation of cyber stalking. You know, and go check the definition of cyber stalking. Cyber stalking is a scenario where someone gets on your profile, is checking your profile on the internet. You know, is using that to make some sort of comments and decision. I'm not sure that President Buhari himself, as a person, is on the internet that often to be cyber stalked. So are we saying that we're just looking for a plethora of charges to make it look like we have something or not? I think that this could have been de-escalated. If they asked me for advice, even on the day that Shure called for a protest, you could have actually let him and watched him and see what happens. And if there was violence, they could have picked him up on that level of, look, this guy has caused breach of peace. Then it'll be something. It'll be something that's cogent. But that never happened. In the 60s, we know. I mean, I got to learn a bit recently that Obafemi Awolowo, who we very much respected tomorrow, actually did sponsor some insurrection against government and trained people, paid for the training of people and the purchase of ammunition. None of that has happened. What pains me most about the Shure case is that Shure is actually a nationalist. He believes in Nigeria. And we don't see a lot of those. A lot of the people who are even siding on the part of government today are tribalists. They are religionists. We see that, and that is, God forbid that this country will be led by the nose by such people. We want people to come to the front and the frontiers who believe in Nigeria, who believe that we can live together, irrespective of our tribe and religion. All this guy is asking for, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I can see and I've read and all that, is that, look, this country can be better for people, and that the vulnerable people who we have neglected for so long deserve a better deal. As we're speaking right now, 800,000 people are on the streets of France. A France that our people go to treat themselves, to holiday. 800,000 people are there on the streets demonstrating over pensions. And here we are. I mean, I don't believe that we need to be reminded that 70% of Nigerians live in ghettos. 13 million children are right there on the streets. 80% to 90% of Nigerian houses have no water piped into their homes. You know, 60 million Nigerians are defecating openly. We've overtaken India. We've overtaken the entire world on that. You know, the nutrition problems that we have, the poverty issues that we have. And we're saying, and we've seen people saying, yes, he's fake. He should have, if he wanted to be a president and if he lost, he should just keep quiet. When is that done? President Buhari himself never kept quiet despite losing elections 3 times. He never kept quiet, you know, and he used some very strong words himself, and that is valid. Sometimes you get angry, you use some strong words. Sometimes you organize outside politics and say, okay, I've lost an election, but these issues still remain, and I believe that's valid. I want to warn a lot of our young people who don't have any perspective on history at all. And I see that that's the problem. Perhaps because history, you know, I'm a historian. And if you don't know where you're coming from, you can't understand why you are where you are. And you can't understand where you need to begin to go to. And this is a problem. Because if Aba women hadn't rioted in the 30s or thereabouts, or in the 20s, you know, by now we probably would all still be paying some taxes to the Queen as I speak to you. If people like Rosa Parks did not stand their ground and say, no, I'm not moving to the back of the bus, by now, even with all the money we have, when we get a visa to the United States, we'll all be sitting in the back of, in fact, we'll be sitting on the back of the plane. If people, we seem to now say that there's no value to holding governments to account. That's what we're saying. When I was in university, we had NANS. And NANS was something, even the military days. And the very interesting thing is that, like Femi Falana will say, President Buhari, our government, his government, as a military government that was then in 1980s, is more obedient to court orders than his government as a civilian government. That's a paradox. So NANS was, the government took NANS serious in the military days. And NANS actually fought for issues of the population. Today, I'm sorry, I got a few friends in, but I see them driving very big cars around, and that's where it ends. ASU used to be like that as well, but now I see ASU arguing over they don't want to get into IPs, they want to get, whatever. I mean, so it is the devaluation of society that we're seeing. I think there's value in what Shure is doing. I may not agree with all of his languages. I may not agree. He never contacted me. I don't know about the modus operandi of what they wanted to achieve. But when I look at France, when I look at Hong Kong, when I look at other places, when I look at Venezuela, when I look at Uruguay, when I look at all these places, when I look at Egypt, where sometimes people are agitating over the price of bread alone, or maybe the increase in the price of fuel, and here we are. We suffer inflation at very double digits, even in some of the things that, I mean, President Buhari increased the price of fuel from 87 or thereabout where it was, or 90 something, and moved it to 145 where it is today. And the people said, okay, we're going to support you, and nothing happened. But can we continue to push the people to the wall? I don't believe so. I believe also that perhaps there's a communication problem in government, that some of these policies that are hard that you want to push, you have to communicate it very clearly to the people so that do not assume that because you have the instrumentality of office, you can do and undo and everybody can go to hell. No, government is about the people, and I personally insist that the people of this country can get a better deal than what they're getting today. That whoever even believes that this is the best government ever should remember that the biggest room for improvement, I mean, the biggest room in the world is a room for improvement. So I believe that Shure is only being brave enough to say, okay, in the past we've seen this, we've seen the Fela, Fela actually contested for president as well. Fela Kuti, not Fela Dote. Kuti actually formed the party and contested for president, and he lost. But he continued to agitate and criticize until the day he died. Gani contested for president and lost, but he was a critic until the day he died. And that's the way it should be. We've had people, we cannot have a scenario where all of us queue up, bowl in hand, waiting for government patronage any which way, supporting any government in power, Ajib and all of that, switching positions, those who were supporting, many of those who were supporting Jonathan before are now today supporting Buhari, and is at any cost and every cost. There has to be a room for integrity in this country, and I believe that we have a lot to achieve, and Shure is only in the forefront. I want to beg government, please, let there not be crisis. With all of this shoving and all of this, and Shure did say that, it was promised by some of the guys who are holding him that, he will not leave detention alive. I want to please beg government that none of such should happen. This situation should be de-escalated as quickly as possible, and I believe it can be de-escalated. If that guy happens to come into any mishap, I believe that some of the reactions that government will see would be beyond imagination, and I don't believe that we need that kind of thing now. If MK Abiola had acquiesced, okay, if he acquiesced and just generally, we will not have a democracy today, and that's Tundu's dad. I'm so sorry to bring up that example. If MK Abiola had gone to government to plead and not insisted on, we will not have a democracy today, which all of these guys are actually benefiting from, including President Buhari himself. So there's value in what is going on. There's value in Shure's agitation, if you ask ask me. And I believe that the situation should be de-escalated. Government should try hard now to ensure that, look, they step in at a very high level, de-escalate the whole thing. This guy is a reasonable person. He's a pro-Nigerian, and I believe that, you know, this whole situation can be brought to a logical conclusion. And, you know, what government should probably do now, which they are just running away from, and this has been done elsewhere. Call the Showore and so just let me make this very important point. Call the Showore and Co and say, okay, you know what, we've heard what you guys are saying. Now we're going to give this concession, and it's going to be a concession that will lead to some sort of wealth transfer from the rich to the poor. We're going to give you this concession. We're going to do that for the people. We're going to do that for the people. We're going to do that for the youth. And before you know it, everybody will support this government. This is an opportunity for this government to score some points, and they are misusing that opportunity because, unfortunately, you know, what we have are just. We're
going to jump in again and go on a break. When we come back, we're going to continue this very important conversation with you, because you are giving real ways of de-escalating a very volatile situation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show. We're still in studio with Tope Fasua. Good morning. Once again, thank you and welcome to the show. I wanted to actually change the topic, but I wanted to build on some of the things you said. One of the things you said was about the values in Nigeria, and you talked a lot about integrity. Our next sort of news headline really will give the average citizen cause to pause, which is really the Orji Uzokhalu arrest and his conviction. This is a case that was ongoing for 12 years. He was finally convicted and arrested over this week. But this is someone that actually, while under this cloud, was able to run and become a senator and actually become chief whip. For the average citizen that doesn't understand these processes, it seems auspicious that someone can go on to become a senator while at the same time under a cloud and actually being convicted. There was an active case. Can you help the average citizen understand how this can happen, especially based on the conversation we had with you a few minutes ago around values, integrity in this country?
I mean, it's unfortunate that values have collapsed, you know, and unfortunately, right now the government is not helping, because some of the things you see are just indications to people that impunity is what reigns. I read a story by a classmate of Orji Uzo in Government College Umahia, you know, who I think he wrote anonymously, and spoke about how Uzo has always bent the rules since he got into secondary school. Now, the truth is that today there are more Orji Uzos in Nigeria who believe that all that matters is that connection, and you don't have to, we're talking about bending rules in a bad way. So you don't have to get into school, you don't have to sit in school, it's about getting the money and showing off. Those people always try to show off more. And, you know, of course, Nigerians will say that, oh, these people who spend money during elections are nice people. You know, there's another guy who is also being prosecuted by AMCON, that's Ifeanyi Uba. I saw about 15-count charge and so on, and he's owing so much money and you know, breached all the, I spoke with people from his constituency, some who are supposed to be even enlightened. Oh, they said he has bought so many Okada for people and all of that, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter if he takes the money from the people, like Orji Uzo has now done, now, because now he's been convicted, we can actually comment on that, and takes the money from the people and spend a little bit of it for the people and keeps the rest of it for his own aggrandizement, and he says he's nice. You know, so when people go into politics like I did, you know, I mean, I went, I knew I couldn't win really, because all I had were my ideas and a little bit of change that I could spend. I moved around the country, I learned a lot, you know, but will Nigeria listen to such? They won't, you know, unfortunately. So many times we create our own reality. Many times when I look at the scenario in this country, I say, well, this is what the people want. The people are being led by the people, by those that they want, and the people are getting the results that they desire. And so if the suffering continues for another 100 or 200 years, or for as long as we can maintain this entity called Nigeria until someone comes to take it over from us, then so be it. However, I say that the few people who understand the value of vision and who can actually understand the value of collective development, those people they are saddled. A few of them who can understand what we're talking about are saddled with coaching and training and explaining some of these issues to the generality of the population. I can tell you, it's all user that you've seen busted. A lot of the guys who have got into politics, whether in the legislature or appointment or even a so-called elected, quote unquote, a lot of them have very wonderful criminal rap sheets. At some point I concluded that in order for you to get into politics successfully in Nigeria, what you needed is to have had a very successful career in crime. And that is what is bearing out now. If you went in, there was a time an AIG was sitting in that house, looked around one day in that Senate and said, look, I can see people that have convicted for armed robbery here, for 419, for whatever. And this is supposed to be the hallowed chambers of the Senate. So highly unfortunate. But government can pull back. Government can take credit for actually convicting this guy, for example, but the same government cannot justify why it cannot stand for the rule of law. So on the other side of what we are speaking about today.
I just want you to also comment on SERAP's activity around this case. A lot of times there's so much criticism that we throw out there, but I just wanted to get your opinion on their activity and just what do you say to them, because they did some good work here.
My take on what, please?
On SERAP, the organization that actually. Sorry, I think I've mixed up my cases. Sorry, we'll go to the next case. I'll let Tunu ask the question. I take that question back.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Fasua, I was going to sort of cite the Constitution, although I hesitate to do that with all these courtesan abuses that we see these days. But Section 66, subsection 1H does say that you're not qualified to contest for any position in the House of Reps or Senate if you have an indictment for fraud. And yet, Senator Uzor Kalu did contest, he won and was made a principal officer. And now, also disturbingly, is the fact that the Senate spokesperson, Senator Akwashiki, says that his seat will not be declared vacant, that is not their custom. Obviously, he does have a right to appeal, but what he actually said, that's most disturbing, is that the reference to former Governor and former Senator Joshua Darie, who was convicted in June 2018. He appealed here. His appeal was, rejected in November 2018. And that up until the end of the 8th Assembly, his seat was left vacant. The 9th National Assembly was inaugurated in June 2019. So for the period between November 2018 and June 2019, that senatorial district went unrepresented. What is your comment on that?
It's unfortunate because the idea of representative democracy is that the voices and the concerns of the people of the constituency should be taken to those houses on behalf of the people, and which is what's not happening right now. And unfortunately, that the tradition of the Senate should not supersede and override the need for representation of the people. Even though I believe that the representation is an overkill in the first place, because I don't know how much representation they're doing. And we heard about 1 trillion naira worth of constituency project which disappeared into people's pockets, and the people are just being used as the mule here to say we're representing our people, their constituency, but most times the constituency don't see those people only until election time, that they go there, spend a little bit of money, obtain that so-called mandate, many times stolen anyway by force and by the barrel of guns and so on, and come back to Abuja and then forget those people for as long as and all that stuff. So I believe that we should scrutinize the idea of the Senate tradition of allowing criminals, convicted criminals, to continue to remain. As a matter of law, even if you've been convicted, you cannot hold a position in this country. That's what he says. You can't even contest in the first place, not to talk of retaining a position on behalf of anyone in this country. So it's highly unfortunate. Again, now, the duty and the role of actually escalating some of these issues and, taking it to the level of, intelligent discussion that may actually be taken on at some point, rest with the middle class people, the few who are still right thinking amongst us from wherever they may come from, and all of that, whether middle, top, or lower class, whatever, we need to actually take control of our own country and the rhetoric on the streets. We need to take control of the narratives on the street and in our society, because otherwise the worst amongst us would continue to lead us, and that's what's called kakistocracy. And Plato did warn about that those who don't get involved will suffer the fate of being led by those who are inferior to them. And for as far back as that, Plato said it, Socrates said it, and so on, and that's what we're seeing today. It's unfortunate that we have a scenario where most of the people in government are actually criminal entities. When you go down to the local level, in Benue State, I saw some guy who was a repeated kidnapper, actually got elected to the House of Assembly or House of Reps or whatever until he was busted a couple of weeks back. A real kidnapper, out-and-out criminal. Because again, our people get confused. And that's the thing, that unfortunately for us, we have been regressing. There was a time after independence that we actually made a bit of progress, but we lost it very shortly after. Now we have a scenario where most of our people don't even understand right from wrong anymore. All that matters is who shows up with the money, and we make a lot of noise, we throw a party, and that's the end of it.
Sorry, my thought came back to me. I wanted to ask you about the process of actually getting this conviction in the end. It took 12 years. EFCC has started and stopped this process. One of the things that this administration has said is the long journey to justice, especially with its anti-corruption platform, that during this government's last term, one of the things they kept on saying is it takes a while to get justice. How does the populace go on a journey that takes 12 years for them to see someone who is accused of these type of crimes get justice? How do we continue to keep people's hope alive that there is justice and actually help people, prevent people from doing these type of corrupt activities if it does take 12 years for justice to be carried out? Well,
this argument between lawyering and justice, and many times I have run-ins with my lawyer friends as to the role of lawyers in the justice process, and it's become a case of who can afford the best lawyer. And of course, we also know that many of the judges have issues. There's the famous case going on with Justice Rita Jimogobia. And when you look at some of the evidences given in court about how bankers used to go to their office in the Federal High Court, I think in Lagos, to collect dollars from them, it's as if they're making daily sales, meaning that lawyers find a way to get across to these judges as well. Now, this is Nigeria, and that's what we're saying, that we need a bigger picture kind of view, and we need this ethos, some of these things to change, So to that extent, 11, 12 years, Joshua Darie and Jolly Nyame as well took 11 years each. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the case of the governor of Adamawa, Fintiri, right now, that man, okay, he came in as acting governor after Yako was stepped down and, and was removed, and he was there for a few months or thereabout, also had a huge corruption case, was convicted, sent to Kuje prison, and bailed from Kuje prison. I didn't know that someone could be bailed from a prison. And of course, that case was swept under the carpet. And, you see, we know now that
we're going to come back to you because this is actually a very good point. You've just said one of the most important things, which is justice is for the rich. We're going to take a quick break and come back and pick up on that.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Tope Fasua, former presidential candidate. So we've discussed so much. And
I think going on break, you said justice was for the rich.
Although we do have a silver lining. Okay, well, this is the second silver lining because the conviction of Orji Uzokalu is one step forward in the fight, the anti-corruption fight. As you said, Mr. Fasua, it might be one step backwards when you think about abuse of rule of law, but we're just trying to be positive here. And then moving on from that, we have the pensions issue, where a federal high court has now ruled that the Attorney General or the federal government needs to recover pensions paid to former governors. I think that's why you were thinking of Sarah.
Yes, that's why I was thinking of Sarah.
Filed that suit in 2017, I believe. But you know, there's nothing better than an idea whose time has come. Because now, in 2019, you have the Zamfara State House of Assembly repealing their own law, and other states are now to follow suit. So I think that's also a victory for the common man. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Though I expect this Federal High Court judgment on pension of former governors, I expect it, of course, it will be appealed. Those former governors are going to take it up to perhaps the Supreme Court, and they'll get the best lawyers, and I think they may overturn that judgment because they have the power and they have the access and the money to get the commercial justice that we know is still around very much these days. However, it's a good one if it can be done, you know, because again, what the British will call taking the piss is what goes on a lot of times in Nigeria. People get there and they believe that they can do and undo and all of that, and then I mean, look at the case of Zamfara. That man, I heard, shared 500 million between himself and a couple of guys before he left, and then was, you know, collecting this 10 million thing every month and had all these 100 million. Oh, come on. You know, again, that's what we're saying, that the bigger picture here, which connects back to the agitation by Shore, that the people should have a voice to say to government, please, this is not going in the way we want. Can we come back to the table and discuss it in spite of elections? It shouldn't be just about, oh, yes, the election, you've lost the election, wait for the next 4 years. The lives of people are at stake. All right, the lives of people are at stake. In Lagos State also, they've got all this huge pension thing going on for their governor. And then, let me tell you, in Kano State, up to the House of Assembly members, if I remember very well, you know, some House of Assembly members have also done that for themselves. I think even in Lagos State, among the big officers, the access to endless amounts of money for the rest of their lives, themselves and their children and their wives and whatever, you know, on the people of this country. Money that's not enough in the first place. I've made analysis here many times about how small our budget is compared to the population. It's only bigger than the budget of DR Congo. In the world, we have the second lowest budget per capita in the world, and most of that money actually goes to all of these big guys that have managed to entrench themselves in the system. And so we're being very unfair to ourselves. This is a great time for us to have a sit down, ask the people, with our government. And that's what they call restructuring. This restructuring that people want. You see, restructuring is not something you wait for 20 years before you start to agitate about and say it's about splitting the country. No. Restructuring should be embedded in the Constitution. And restructuring should be targeted at, is this Constitution working for the people of this country and the most vulnerable especially? If it's not working, then it needs to be looked at. And I think that we've got to that point as the people in this country. So the lawyering will go on. A lot of egregious and outrageous laws still exist that disenfranchise financially the majority of the people of this country. All of them need to be looked at the state, federal, local level, and what have you.
Thank you. I want to talk to you as I want you to put your economist hat on. One of the things that President Buhari said in his inauguration speech was about lifting 100 million people out of poverty. Last week, we got the news that Nigeria will have 25% of the world's poor without any reforms, according to the World Bank, in a decade, unless policymakers really focus on economic growth and increasing and creating jobs. The idea of 25% of the world's poorest people being in Nigeria. As an economist, what does this government really need to do to show that it is serious about lifting 100 million people out of poverty?
Well, first of all, I'll commend the government on two things, and that's where I am. I do commend them sometimes. Number one, setting that idea or that ambition of lifting 100 million people out of poverty, that's very ambitious. Great. China did it. India is doing it presently, and so on and so forth. And I understand that what they mean is not to create 100 million jobs, but to create, if you created 2-3 million jobs by the private sector and also the public sector, which we must never forget, and also the public sector, 2 million jobs, 3 million jobs will take 50, 60 million people out of poverty already, because because one person sorts out one or two people and all of that. And we're talking about households now. 2 million jobs will probably even solve 100 million poverty if it is such that it's directed towards, doing such, So that's a great one. I will also commend them for introducing the finance bill with this current budget. Do you know that we went to sleep since 1999? In the military days, there used to be finance bill. What does that mean? That every budget, when you're floating a budget, to the Senate or to the National Assembly, you also accompany it with something that says, okay, in this coming year, we're going to increase these taxes, we're going to reduce those taxes, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And you can look at this finance bill, says that for companies that are earning, if your turnover is below 25 million in a year, you are not subject to paying VAT, you're not even subject to paying any taxes. I think that's wonderful. It's a major coup for the government if they can get it through, because it shows clearly that they understand what the issues are. You don't tax those guys that are way down there. And that's another way of actually boosting business as well. But one of the things I would call the attention to is that in what we call in economics public good, we're not doing well in that department in this country. And the public good are education, health, if you like, environment, security. All of those are avenues to employ people one-on-one. Even working for government, if you want to bring in some technology in between, or even farm out a little bit of that, but it's not all of them, these things that are bankable. On Thursday, one of the things I floated an NGO called Teach Nigeria after contesting, and I'm not contesting again anyway, but I realized that in this country there are schools, public schools that have been totally neglected, where some of the children have not seen a novel in their life, not a novel, they've not seen a textbook in their lives, in fact, no teaching goes on, many of them don't even have notebooks. So we set up that one to also try and bridge the gap. I'm collecting, like used books from middle-class people which your children have discarded and all of that, and let's take it to the hinterland. I went to one of such schools, even within Abuja, and it was quite appreciative. So there's all of that lacuna. The public goods sector is one sector we can invest our energy in, to get this boost going on. We have 13 million children out of school. Someone has to teach them. They have to go back to school, whether we like it or not. We're not doing enough in that regard. So those are jobs available. And these are things that, look, it's a kind of revolution. Again, that use of the word revolution is what we need. The government can drive the revolution. Revolution cannot be outlawed as a word, because it's actually what we need in this country right now. The government can take it over. The government can partnership or whatever on this and say, look, this revolution you want. It's a case of, it's a case of, like everybody should actually get their boots on and get going right now. Yes.
I know you called your manifesto Revolution of Ideas, but I didn't expect you to use that word so soon, or right in the middle of this imbroglio that we're discussing. Be careful there. But referring to your manifesto, you wanted VAT.
It can't be outlawed. The government can drive it.
You wanted VAT to be maintained at 5%, but that hasn't happened. It's been increased. What are your thoughts on that? Very quickly as we round up the conversation.
Yes. But again, yeah, I wanted it to. Well, I knew that it could be maintained at 5%. However, that would also take a few more. Like you could maintain it at 5%, but we should drive luxury taxes, which Okonjo-Iweala, when she was here, tried to talk about. Nobody's talking about that now. The state should go after their property taxes more. All right, all those GRAs and all those. Say, let people begin to pay up and on. And now, if I had my way and if I was in government, I'll be selling to the rich people and the middle class in this country. What I'll be selling you guys, because I'll be telling you what you get for paying what. That's it. And you can say, look, if you're a businessman and you pay your taxes, I'll tell you how you're going to make so many more millions from what you've done, or billions if you like. And however, what we're doing now is a scenario where everybody is resisting the taxes, and it's what they call in economics and finance a race to the bottom, because the people are not paying, the government is complaining that the people are not paying, and the little that the people are paying, the government is misusing as well. So, but I support that VAT should go up to 7.5, because we lost the opportunity to drive those other taxes. However, if you look around the world, even in the Arab world that used to be tax-free, right now they've also introduced VAT. UAE did that 1st of January 2017. Saudi Arabia did that 1st of January 2018. And in fact, it's for the entire Gulf cooperation countries, GCCs, So even when Arab tax-free countries are actually introducing VAT, we cannot be here speaking of 5% VAT.
As always, it's a pleasure. And again, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and we are going to have you back.
Run out of time.
Thank you. We've run out of time.